The wind at forward operating base Vega had a bite like broken glass. It screamed between the stacked cargo containers and tore at the seams of our winter tents with a fury that felt personal. At 11,500 feet in the Altai Mountains, mistakes didn't get second chances. They got memorial plaques. I pulled my parka tighter and walked with my usual deliberate steps, conserving energy. Two privates were struggling to slide a pallet of emergency rations off the back of a battered transport truck. Left side, lower, I said, my voice barely a whisper over the wind but sharp enough to cut through. Tori, keep the straps taut. Balance will shift on the third push. They obeyed without question. They always did. From the edge of the command platform, a raised wooden outpost ringed with sandbags and frost, Captain Royce Halpern watched me. I knew the type, broad-shouldered, loud, used to shouting until something happened. I'd worked with a dozen like him over the years. I didn't take it personally anymore. Still, his gaze scraped across me like sandpaper. Look at her. I overheard him mutter to his second, Corporal Levin, as I crouched to double-check a tension strap. Logistics sergeant playing field ops. Bet she's never even spent a night outside heated quarters. They both chuckled. I didn't flinch. Let them talk. Let them joke. The mountain didn't care about their opinions, and neither did I. Moments later, the crunch of boots on ice signaled his approach. I stood, my breath a silver plume in the bitter air. Sergeant Ray, he boomed. I count 7 pallets. Manifest said 8. Want to explain why we're short? Without looking up, I swiped through the tablet in my gloved hands. The 8th pallet was rerouted to FOB Vega Echo at 0600 hours. Your authorization. You made room for your footlockers. I met his eyes then. Calm. Steady. No challenge. Just truth. The smirk drained from his face. He hadn't remembered. His pride stung, I could tell. The two privates suddenly found the ground very interesting. I want every crate accounted for, Halpern snapped, turning on his heel. And I want a full inventory of the supply depot on my desk by 2000. Every bandage. Every protein bar. Every sock. Clear? Yes, sir, I said to his retreating back. The wind whipped my words away, but I knew he heard me. Knew it bothered him more that I didn't raise my voice. I went back to work. I always went back to work. Inside the briefing shack, a cramped container that stank of wet wool and burnt instant coffee, Halpern slapped a topographic map on the table, tracing a red route up a jagged line. The Serpent's Gate Pass, he announced. Command wants eyes on it before the next snow system moves in. We move at 0600 tomorrow. I stood in the back, silent, as was expected of a logistics NCO. I wasn't there to speak. I was there to observe. Still, when the barometer dropped 38 millibars in an hour and thermal imaging showed inversion activity curling like a storm god's breath over the eastern ridgeline, I spoke. Captain, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like ice cracking underfoot. Halpern turned, already irritated. Yes, Sergeant. A cyclonic weather event is forming. We're looking at less than 18 hours before it hits the eastern range. Not 24. If you leave at dawn, you'll be inside its funnel by midday. He crossed his arms. And now we have a meteorologist in logistics? Chuckles broke out. I waited for them to stop. Also, I continued, standard issue MREs provide 2,500 calories. At the projected temperatures and altitude, your men will burn over 6,000 per day. They'll be in a severe deficit within 10 hours. Hypothermia onset will accelerate. Now he was in my face. Your job, he growled, is to stack crates, not predict the weather or count calories. Am I clear? My job is to ensure this unit is supplied and capable. Marching into a storm with underfed, underprepared men is neither. Silence pressed into the walls. He stared, trying to find fear. Weakness. Rebellion. He found none. Dismissed, he said finally. Since you've got time for weather analysis, you can reorganize the entire depot. I want every label turned out. Every row aligned. I nodded. Understood, sir. And I left. Back outside, the cold clamped around me like a vice. Snow was falling sideways. The wind howled like something ancient and angry. I pulled the canvas flaps open to the supply tent, stepped inside, and went to work. The supply tent was a frigid tomb of order waiting to be imposed. Crates stacked like gravestones, rows crooked from the last airlift, labels smeared from melting snow. The only light came from a single swaying bulb, throwing long shadows as I worked. It was cold enough that my breath hung in the air like smoke. I welcomed the silence. There was a rhythm to organizing, count, stack, align. I moved like I always did, quietly, efficiently. You can't fake that kind of control. You either learned it through years of brutal necessity, or you didn't. I didn't learn it in a warehouse. An hour in, I was halfway through recataloging the medical bay crates when the tent flap ripped open again. The wind howled through like a freight train. Snow spiraled in. Captain Halpern stepped inside, followed by Corporal Levin and Private Tory. Halpern carried a large steel bucket, rimed with frost. His face wore the kind of smug grin that always comes before something stupid. "Still at it, Sergeant?" he asked, mock warmth in his voice. "Thought maybe you were getting a little too cozy in here. Can't have our logistics staff going soft, can we?" I didn't move. I didn't speak. Just turned toward him, neutral as snowfall. "Out here," he said, stepping forward. "You acclimate or you die. Consider this, your orientation." The bucket tipped. Ice water crashed over my head in a single, punishing cascade. It slammed into me with the weight of a fist. The cold was a living thing. It punched through fleece and thermals, through layers designed to trap warmth. It stripped me bare in an instant, clawed its way down my spine, robbed my breath. For a long second, the only sound was the dripping of water freezing where it landed. I didn't flinch, didn't shiver. Halpern waited, smile frozen, watching for the breakdown. The tears, the anger, the weakness. He got a reaction, just not the one he expected. I stepped forward. My left hand rose gently, almost affectionately, to the back of his neck. My right hand came up fast and low. A palm strike. Precise. Brutal. I felt the impact travel through his jaw into the base of his skull. The wet crack echoed off the canvas. Halpern crumpled. He hit the ground with the finality of a dropped stone. Levin gasped. Tori went pale. Neither moved. I stepped back and flexed my fingers, testing for damage. Then I looked at them both. "Get a medic," I said. "Tell the major the captain slipped." Hard. They hesitated. Now. They ran. I was placed under arrest within the hour, not in a cell, but in an empty steel shipping container usually reserved for hazardous waste. They locked the heavy doors from the outside. There was no heat, no light, just a cot, a chemical toilet, and the metallic groan of the storm pressing in on all sides. I sat, soaked and still, arms folded around myself to conserve heat. And I waited. They didn't bring food. Not at first. I sat in that steel box, soaked clothes turned to armor of ice, muscles twitching from the cold. I refused to lie down. You sleep in cold like that, you don't always wake up. I stayed upright. I listened to the wind scream. Eventually, the door opened. Major Corwin stepped in, parka unzipped, breath fogging. He was a man split in two, one half protocol, the other pragmatism. He carried a thermos and a file folder. He didn't hand me the drink. He didn't need to. "I read the report," he said. "Corporal Levin and Private Tory are surprisingly consistent." I said nothing. Corwin looked at the file. "Your record's a mess. I mean that literally. Entire sections redacted. Citations for medals without any citations. A discharge labeled non-combat training injury that took you out of circulation for 23 months. Then you reappear as logistics NCO with a spotless, boring paper trail. Almost too spotless." I let the silence stretch. Outside, the wind changed pitch. I listened carefully. It meant the front edge of the storm had arrived. It would hit full force before nightfall. "They're calling it a misstep," Corwin continued. "Captain Halpern has a cracked jaw and a concussion. He claims he slipped. No witnesses. No charges, for now. But you'll be shipped out. Quietly. Discreetly. The kind of quiet that follows people like you." I still didn't move. Then the commotion started. Muffled shouts. The distant crackle of a radio. Heavy boots pounding past the container. Corwin's expression shifted from vague irritation to something else. He opened the door. Wind punched into the container like a fist. A young lieutenant was sprinting through the snow, goggles askew. "Sir, Patrol Viper 1 missed check-in. No contact for over 45 minutes. Corwin turned back to me. "Halpern's last order. He sent Miller's team towards Serpent's Gate. Ignored your storm warning. They're still out there." His eyes were glassy with realization. He turned and ran into the storm. 5 minutes later, he was back. He didn't ask. He didn't pace. He didn't threaten. He simply looked at me like a drowning man begging for a rope. "Sergeant Ray," he said, voice tight. "I need your help. They're going to die out there. And you're the only one who knew this was coming." I stood, ice cracking off my uniform in flakes. "You want me to go after them? I want you to lead a rescue." I stepped closer, eye level with him now. No longer his NCO. Not anymore. I want operational control. No oversight. No interference. Done. I want access to everything in Crate Echo 7 Bravo. He blinked. "That's sealed under." "Done," he cut in. "I picked the team." He nodded again. "Who?" My smile was thin and cold. "Give me the ones who laughed." The moment I stepped out of the container, the air changed. People moved differently around me. Not because of rank. Because they could feel it. Something had shifted. I wasn't the quiet logistics sergeant anymore. Evans, Tori, and Levin waited near the supply tent, looking like kids caught sneaking into a bar. Their eyes followed me like I'd grown fangs. Good. Fear would keep them alive. We met at Crate Echo 7 Bravo. Experimental, sealed, and locked under Captain Halpern's authority. The lock didn't last long. "Major," I said. Corwin handed me the bolt cutters. 2 quick snaps, and the lid came open with a hiss of frost. The gear inside was beautiful, sleek, advanced, designed for survival in the kind of hell we were walking into. They stared like they were seeing alien tech. Heated composite snowshoes, adaptive thermal suits, smart rations, signal trackers, tools for ghosts. "Strip." They blinked. Evan spoke first. "Oh, what?" "Down to your base layer. Everything you're wearing is a liability. If you go out there in that junk, you'll freeze before you reach the ridge." I wasn't asking. They obeyed. I handed them the suits, showed them how to seal the wrists, how to adjust the boots to sync with the snowshoes. They moved with the hesitant obedience of soldiers doing something they don't understand but can't afford to question. These suits regulate body temperature down to the molecular level. They'll keep your core warm without letting sweat freeze on your skin. I tossed them ration tubes. 1 every 4 hours, no exceptions. They taste like concrete, but they'll keep your blood moving. They began to understand this wasn't a supply run. This was war. I checked the signal gear, calibrated it by feel. My gloves clicked over the interface like I was tuning a familiar instrument. My hands didn't shake. Outside, the storm roared. Visibility was down to inches. The world was a screaming white void. I pulled my hood up. My mask sealed into place. Only my eyes remained visible. "Stay close," I said. "You fall behind, I leave you behind. Match my pace. Breathe through your nose. Don't speak unless spoken to." They nodded. The wind hit us like a freight train the moment we stepped out. I leaned into it. We walked. Out there, in the white, the storm wasn't just a backdrop. It was an enemy. It clawed at our gear, our eyes, our breath. Snow hit us like shrapnel. You couldn't see the horizon. You couldn't even see the ground. Only the shape of the boots in front of you, if you were lucky. I set the pace. Measured, relentless, efficient, like a metronome cutting through the chaos. Within 30 minutes, they were losing composure. Tori's breathing grew ragged. Levin was staggering, off balance. But it was Evans who broke first. He tripped over a hidden rock, went down hard. I heard the grunt, the crunch of gear in snow, and turned on instinct. He was struggling, not just physically, but mentally. His body was slowing down. Dangerously slow. I dropped to my knees beside him. "Don't talk," I said, already peeling back his outer layer. His eyes widened as I cracked a heat pack, pressed it against his chest over his heart. I could feel the chill in his blood. Too far gone, and his organs would start shutting down. "You're in shock. Breathe with me. Slow. In, out." He tried. Shaking. I grabbed a ration tube from his belt, popped the cap, pushed it to his lips. "All of it. Now." He gagged at the taste, but swallowed. Moments passed. The flush of heat returned to his face, just barely. "Get up," I ordered. He hesitated. "Get up." It wasn't a suggestion. The ground was death. He obeyed, groaning. "You focus on one thing. One step. That's your whole world now. Understand?" He nodded. Weak, but something in his eyes had hardened. "Good. Fall again, and I leave you. Keep moving." We pushed forward. I led by feel, not by sight. I could sense the terrain beneath my boots, the way the snow changed texture, the sound of the wind curling around rocks. These mountains speak, if you know how to listen. Hours passed. We were ghosts now, moving through a blizzard that could swallow helicopters whole. And then, finally, I stopped. We stood before a jagged outcrop, barely visible, just enough shelter to break the wind. "They're here," I said. "Somewhere close." The signal unit hummed to life. I scanned in a slow arc. Then, beep. Faint. But there. I pointed. "Start digging." No questions. Just action. A few feet down, Levin's glove struck fabric. And just like that, the nightmare got real. We clawed at the snow like animals, desperation driving our hands faster than the cold could steal their strength. Inch by inch, we pulled back the layers of ice and frost until a frozen sleeve gave way to a shoulder, a helmet, a face. Sergeant Miller was the first we found, half buried, eyelids crusted with ice, lips blue. His breathing was shallow, barely there. His right leg was twisted, a crude splint in place. A makeshift shelter surrounded them, snow-packed and tunneled, barely large enough for 4 men to huddle in. They had tried to dig in. It had almost worked. Almost. I took over. "Levin, warmers. Tori, prep saline drips. Evans, you're with me." I moved from man to man, assessing damage, calculating risk. Miller was critical. Pulse thready. He had hours, maybe. One of the others was unconscious, but stable. 2 more semi-lucid, frostbitten and shivering, but not beyond saving. I cut open Miller's pant leg. The skin beneath was purple, mottled. His leg was a mess, but it wasn't the priority. "Heart's unstable," I said. "He's slipping into V-fib." Evans froze as I reached for the med kit. Then I saw it. He wasn't looking at Miller. He was staring at my forearm. The sleeve had ridden up. Just a bit. Enough to reveal the ink beneath. The scarred tattoo I thought I'd buried long ago. Stylized wings, a dagger, a caduceus. The mark of the archangels. He whispered the word like a prayer. "You were one of them." I didn't respond. I had a job to do. "Paddles," I said, not looking up. "Charged to 200 joules." We shocked Miller once. Nothing. Twice, his back arched. He gasped. Breath returned. I checked his pulse. Weak, but real. He was alive. Evans was still staring at me, a written across his frostbitten face. I finally met his gaze. "This isn't about me. It's about him. Stay focused." He nodded, lips pressed tight. No more questions. I moved like a ghost through the wreckage of that storm. One patient, then the next. Vitals stabilized. Heat packs applied. Nutrient paste administered. I pulled life back from the brink, one broken man at a time. By the end, they were still critical, but stable. It was enough. We had brought them back from the edge. Now we had to bring them home. Getting them stable was only the first battle. Now we had to get them off the mountain. 2 of them can walk with assistance, I said, glancing over the group. Miller and Reyes can't. We build sleds. Sleds? Tori asked, voice cracking. I looked him dead in the eye. Litters. We improvise. Trek poles, thermal blankets, paracord. You want them to survive, you help me build. No more protests. We worked quickly, hands raw and stiff. Evans and Levin constructed the first frame under my direction, looping cords and tightening bindings until the blanket stretched tight across the rig. Tori stabilized the second one, cursing the wind every time a gust tried to steal his breath. When we were done, we loaded Miller and Reyes, secured them tightly, wrapped in every spare layer we had. The rest leaned on each other, barely upright. I divided the team. Evans, Tori, you take the first sled. Levin, you're with me. We lashed the ropes to our packs. The extra weight was a curse, but a necessary one. I took the lead. The wind had turned crueler, louder, stronger. The storm was in full throat now, and it wasn't letting go. Step, drag, plant, breathe. That was the rhythm. Over and over. Step, drag, plant, breathe. Visibility was gone. I relied on instinct, on memories of topography, on the wind's subtle shifts. The snow stung like razors. Our pace slowed to a crawl. Then Sean, half conscious, leaning on Tori, fell. The sled shifted. One wrong pull, and it started to slide sideways toward a hidden drop. Let go, I shouted. Evans froze. I didn't. I lunged, planted my feet, and threw my weight into the rope. The sled stopped inches from the edge, the snow groaning beneath it. We were a breath away from disaster. This storm is getting worse, Levin yelled over the howl. I know. I scanned the area, feeling for shelter. There, I pointed. We build again. Snow cave. They looked stunned, exhausted beyond words. I didn't care. Start digging. We dug with hands and shovels, boots and elbows, whatever we had. We hollowed out the drift like burrowing animals. An entrance sloped up, trapping heat. We widened the belly to fit 8. Inside, it was dark and quiet. The howling faded to a dull roar. Warmth crept in slowly. The cave was life, carved into death. Inside, I didn't rest. I moved from patient to patient, checking vitals, adjusting packs, keeping circulation going. The others stared at me like I was something else. Something other. But I was just doing what needed to be done. Like always. The cave felt like a miracle, a silence that dulled the panic, a womb of snow holding back the wrath of the mountain. But I knew it wouldn't last. Time was still our enemy. Every hour we stayed, our chances of making it back shrank. I checked the pulse on Miller again. Weak, but holding. The warmth had helped. So had the nutrient paste and foredrip. He was still clinging to the cliff's edge, but no longer sliding. Diaz was stable, if dazed. Reyes had frostbite down both hands. Wouldn't know how bad until we got back. They were breathing. That was enough. I knelt by the entrance, feeling the winds whisper through the tunnel. Then I heard it. Change. The pitch of the wind shifted. Just slightly. The pressure lightened, barely noticeable unless you lived inside storms. I stood, turned to the others. It's breaking. Evans looked up, hollow-eyed. What? The storm. It's fading. We move in 10. They didn't cheer. They didn't smile. They just started moving. They trusted me now, and they were learning, slowly, that survival isn't loud. It's quiet, focused, relentless. We packed in silence, adjusted the litters, checked every strap twice. I gave each of them a fresh tube of rations. Eat now. You'll need it. No one complained about the taste this time. Outside, the world had changed. The whiteout was gone. In its place, a surreal twilight, the sky bruised with deep violet and gold, the stars peeking through a thinning veil of cloud. Snow crunched beneath our feet, and frost sparkled like crushed diamonds. It was beautiful. It was still deadly, but it was navigable. I led again. We moved in coordinated rhythm, the mountain groaning around us as it slowly released its grip. Hours passed. We reached the final ridge just before dawn. The floodlights from FOB Vega pierced the darkness like lighthouse beams through fog. Evans whispered, "We're going to make it." I didn't answer. I just kept walking, every step a statement. We hit the outer perimeter like survivors crawling out of a grave. And then, something happened. The base had come alive. Figures emerged from tents and containers, wide-eyed, speechless. The glare of the floodlights painted our frozen bodies in stark contrast, casting long shadows across the snow. We must have looked like something from a nightmare. 8 battered figures hauling homemade sleds through the ice-crusted darkness, faces frostbitten, clothes torn, eyes hollow with exhaustion. At our head, I walked, silent, upright, ice clinging to my lashes, blood dried beneath my gloves, every muscle screaming with fatigue, but I didn't stop. Behind me, my team trudged forward, dragging the litters that carried the men we had pulled back from death. Every step we took echoed across the compound. And then, Evans stopped. He stood tall, straightened his back, and snapped to attention with a crispness that cut through the cold like a shot. No one told him to. No one needed to. Tori and Levin followed, dropping into position behind him like dominoes falling. Their eyes were locked on me, not with fear or confusion, but with something deeper. Respect. No. Reverence. One by one, soldiers around the base mirrored the gesture. Rigid spines. Stiff salutes. A quiet line forming to mark our path to the med tent. No one spoke. There were no cheers. No clapping. Only the crunch of boots and the sound of breath in the thin air. Major Grayson stood ahead of them all, jaw tight, hands balled into fists at his sides. And next to him, face swollen and arm in a sling, stood Captain Hawthorne. I met his eyes for a fleeting second as I passed. He didn't sneer this time. He didn't speak. He just nodded, slow, deliberate. It wasn't a command. It was an apology. I didn't stop for him. I didn't need his words. I hadn't done any of it for redemption or acknowledgement. I had done it because it needed to be done. Because that's who I am. Respect wasn't the goal. It was just the consequence of getting people home. Alive. The storm was gone. The mountain lay quiet in the moonlight, its wrath spent, its secrets buried once more beneath fresh snow. Inside the base, the world had returned to order. On the surface, soldiers resumed their duties. Radios buzzed again, but something fundamental had shifted. Not in procedure, but in perception. I returned to the supply tent alone, moving like a ghost through the half-lit base. My body ached in ways that couldn't be described. Burning muscles, cracked lips, lungs scoured raw by wind. But I didn't lie down. I had other things to tend to. Under the buzz of a single bare bulb, I laid out my gear. Not the standard issue inventory. This was mine, quietly tucked into my personal crate and marked only with a coded tag known to a few. A harness worn smooth by years of use. Ropes of ultra fiber, still dusted with frost. A climbing axe, the steel edge kissed by mountain stone. A med pouch, stained with old blood, meticulously restocked. I sat on an overturned crate, pulled the whetstone from its pouch, and began sharpening. Shing, shing, shing. The sound was crisp, surgical. Each stroke a breath, each breath a meditation. I wasn't preparing for war. I was maintaining the tools that had kept people alive. That always came first. The tent flap opened quietly behind me. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. Evans stood there in silence for a long moment before moving across the room. He didn't speak, didn't offer excuses or apologies. He simply walked to the corner where the rescued team's rifles were stacked, chose one, and sat down. He broke it down with a reverence I recognized. It wasn't about the weapon. It was about the man it belonged to. About honoring the fact that he still had breath in his body. I didn't thank him. He didn't expect it. This was how warriors spoke, with actions, not words. We worked side by side under the yellow light. Two soldiers from very different worlds, now sharing the same truth. That survival isn't about ego. It's about precision, control, sacrifice, and respect. Respect is earned one choice at a time. Never demanded, never given freely. Only forged, in ice, in silence, in blood. And I am still here. Still counting gear. Still sharpening blades. Still walking through storms when no one else will. Call me whatever you want. Ghost. Operator. Kestrel. I am who I've always been. And I'm not done yet. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.